So welcome to the Grand Rapids Label video blog series. This series is dedicated to innovation discussions in the industrial and durable label space. Our goal is to provide, valuable information to the viewer on topics that can help drive the industry forward. My name's Bill Bergstrom. I'm the Vice President of Sales and Marketing here at Grand Rapids Label. We're certainly excited today to have Kevin Gofron here with us from Avery, Dennison. Kevin is the Business Development Manager for the Durable Labels segment at Avery, Dennison. And so we're certainly excited to have Kevin with us. Maybe most viewers know Avery Dennison, Fortune 500 company in the pressure-sensitive label material manufacture and distribution. Also involved in apparel marking and RFID, number of different components that make up Avery Dennison to the tune of $7 billion in annual revenue. So super excited to have Kevin here. Again, we're going to keep our discussion surrounding innovation, industrial, durable, right? We define that as marketplaces like automotive and aerospace and appliance and heavy equipment, power sports, things of that nature. So Kevin, before we get going, we have a few key topics: current state and a couple of different horizons on future state and innovation. Before we get going, maybe a little bit about yourself and your background, and we'll go from there.
Sure, sounds good, Bill. Good to see you. So yeah, like Bill mentioned, Kevin Gofron, Business Development Manager for Avery Dennison. Cover the United States with some global activity. Been in this industry for going on 30 years now. So been in the durable labeling space for that whole period of my career. I have a bachelor's degree in chemistry, MBA in marketing, and I've been fortunate to basically have roles within the whole supply chain within a durable label. So started out as a bench chemist, formulating adhesives and inks and films. Then went into marketing, then did a role in sales, did some manufacturing work, business development is where I'm currently at now. Been with Avery for 10 years, and gives me a really nice, good background on all the different things I've gone through my career of making a label all the way to selling a label, which is pretty slick. So it's been quite the journey.
It is. It's a great journey, and certainly adds a ton of credibility to what we're going to talk about today, right?
Absolutely.
And we are going to focus on innovation, but before we kind of dive into those couple of different horizons of innovation, let's start with a conversation about current state of the industrial durable label market. We're coming out of COVID, right? Hopefully, so maybe that starts to color things a little bit. But let's start with a quick discussion on current state of the durable label market.
Yeah, sure. So what I'm seeing out there right now is when I'm comparing Q1 of this year to Q1 of last year, because I think really we've seen a really good uptick in durable and industrial labeling Q1 last year prior to COVID hitting. And my thought is if we can get back to those run rates and that steady state, that would be a very good sign that we're kind of back to at least the semblance of a stable industry. And we're definitely seeing that. I mean, we're definitely seeing some growth. Certain industrial segments are doing better than prior year. And so I think we're, knock on wood, I think we're kind of out of the woods a little bit. I think where my head's at right now is just understanding, is this still pent up demand that is being, shuttled forward, and then we're going to see maybe a dip down once steady state gets going, or is this a steady state? So we're kind of keeping our eye on that right now. But like I said, certain industries I definitely feel are producing pretty strongly. I think when you look at automotive space, which is a big one here in the States, it seems like they've pushed back, at least for the coming year, pushed back new models, and that they're still kind of picking up volume from previous year models at this stage. So with that push out, I think we'll see a steadying and a pickup within the automotive for the next couple of years. So I think right now looks pretty good. again, barring any disruptions moving forward here, I think we're going to see a pretty good year this year in industrial labeling.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up automotive. Grand Rapids Label has plenty of exposure there, and we certainly do look at that as a kind of a bellwether for other parts of the industrial durable label market. And I'll throw up a quick graph here. Hopefully everybody can see that. From IHS Market, which is heavily involved in automotive industry tracking and forecasting. And so, kind of interesting, to your point, Kevin, things going along, the automotive world in regards to light vehicle production, trending slightly down, but then obviously a big dip here in 2020, certainly COVID induced. And then a steady rise back to very strong production numbers on out as we go, some years out, but certainly short term, some significant growth and rebound, so to speak, V-shaped recovery, whatever you want to call it, in the industrial or in the North American light vehicle production, again, as kind of a bellwether for other industries. So certainly looks to validate what you're seeing in the marketplace, what we're seeing as a converter. So certainly good stuff there. But again, today's about innovation, right? And at Grand Rapids Label, we frame that on a couple of different horizons, and that's what we wanted to talk about today, right? We kind of look 1 to 2 years out, and then 5 years out. It gets a little tough in our belief. It gets a little tough much beyond 5 years. So today's innovation side of the conversation will really frame around those two timelines, if we can. So we'll start with 1 to 2, right? The near-term horizon. What do you see coming soon when you consider innovation? What are the conversations happening within Avery Dennison surrounding durables in 1 to 2 years out?
Yeah, it's a great question. And, being in this space for the amount of time I've been in it, I can definitely speak to the slowness of innovation in durable goods. It's a very conservative type applications typically. What you see is that it's highly regulated, right? And there's just a lot of testing that goes in, and performance testing that goes into these labels. And so making a switch ad hoc really does not happen. So it really comes down to two things that I've seen where innovation really gets spurred on in this space. One, either a regulation changes, so something changes that impacts what the label has to perform to, and that could be within an industry, or that could be within overall within a certain segment within durable goods. The other one really being, the OEM just making changes to the product that impacts the performance of the label, right? So a couple examples of that. One would be, where we have an industry change. Chemical drum labeling probably 5 or 6 years ago had a change with GHS, when they wanted to add some color onto the label that typically could have been monochrome, just a black and white. That change spurred on a whole opportunity now for inkjet printing to come into play within that space, because inkjet does a really good job with color, and can really mix different colors. You can match logos, OEM logos, however you wanted to do it. So give them an opportunity to really come in and really kind of do an impact within that industry. And for us, it's automatically, well, that's a separate top coat. That's a top coat that now has to adhere, take in that ink system, which is probably the hardest one to take. You're basically taking a wet drop onto the coating, and it has to soak it in, it has to perform. So something like that really spurred on some innovation within that space, right? The other one being just where within an OEM making changes, sustainability is a big topic. It covers, across all boards. We're not seeing a lot of things happening in asking about the label to be sustainable. I think there's always the issue of, hey, is it a vinyl label? We want to get rid of vinyl. But that's still, it's always seems to be talk as opposed to really action on that. But where we do see sustainability impacting us from a label standpoint, and Grand Rapids label as well, is when they change the substrate. right? So let's say they change a plastic part to make it lighter to decrease cost during shipment, and just to make the product lighter overall. Uh, the assumption automatically is made that the label they currently have is going to perform just as well.
Dangerous assumption.
A very dangerous assumption, and I can't tell you how many times you get the call. It's like their labels are failing. Okay, what happened? And then you find out they changed something on their end, right? And that's just the education part of it, right? That they just they don't know labels, and that's really where it comes up to us to really educate them on that part. That you make a change. That's a change that could impact the performance, because the standards that they have, they're not going to change though. The label still has to meet performance guidelines, but they're changing the substrate that we're going to need to bond to that could affect that performance of the label. So when that happens, then all of a sudden you have to start coming up with ideas. So what I see typically what happens in the industrial space is that it is more line extension, incremental innovation. Where you have a change, and either that top coat needs to change, a film change, an adhesive change, something needs to change within the components of the label itself to give us the performance that we need, right? So that's typically what I see happening in terms of innovation. Now, moving forward, I'm seeing happening out there, I'm definitely seeing more wanting the label to do more than just emit a message to a consumer. So a warning label has to be on there, has to stay on there, and has to look like a warning label through the life of the product. What more can that label do, right? What technology else can be stuffed into that label that potentially could add value to the OEM and the consumer? So RFID would come up, right? Can you get an RFID label, chip into a label and have it communicate a little bit more with the consumer, or just give you better track and trace abilities throughout the supply chain? Sensors being put into labels, temperature sensors and different things, allowing it to show the consumer that something's changing within there. So we're definitely seeing some additional technology wanting to be put in. The challenge always comes up to where these conversations are being had, and they're always great conversations to have, but then you start to lay out the cost. And they're like, well, that's kind of more pie in the sky now versus something that we really feel we can implement. So you start to really drive down into a discussion at that point of, okay, yes, there's the cost of the label, but then there's the cost of what you want that label to attain to in terms of the total cost throughout your supply chain, right? So I have a label, a great example would be a car models, and we've seen it, or any type of industrial good that gets sent back in, right? There's a warranty, there's a recall, we got to bring it back in. And usually they recall a whole year. If they don't have a good track on it, they just bring all this stuff back in. Well, if you have a label that can kind of mimic to say, you don't need to bring everything back in. This time frame needs to be brought back in. It's much more effective. There's much more cost savings that way, right? So that's the power. Yes, you're paying more for that label up front, but the overall cost of ownership is much lower if something like that were to happen. So I think that those are the conversations that really need to start to take place, because I think typically what you see is you can see the cost label. We can't afford that label. That's going to work. It's a great idea. We can see value, but so you really need to talk them through the bigger vision of what this label is going to do. And that really comes down to, who is in the conversation, right? If you just have a purchasing or buyer involved, you're going to be in this cost discussion pretty much. That's their job, right? And they do it very well. The idea is to get more people involved, right? Quality, engineering, brand owners, everybody involved in this, and really saying, what is your overall scope and direction of your product, and how can this label play a bigger role in that? I think those are the discussions that, converters, material suppliers all together and collaborate and have that discussion with people to understand and educate at that moment. I think this will go much smoother. And I think innovation, you would start to see more incremental innovation happening at a greater pace like you do in other industries, like the consumer product packaging, areas. You see a lot of innovation happening there. Why can't we do some of that stuff in the industrial space? And I just think it's a different feel to it, and it doesn't have to be. So I think we need to see more happening there. Is one area that I definitely see some potential here in the short term. Definitely seeing a lot more auto apply with industries coming back to the States, to compete. The unfortunate of it, you can't have people necessarily applying labels to products. I mean, robotics is definitely a trend to help in cost and just be able to compete on a global scale with automation. So that certainly impacts labels, and you guys would know that better than anybody in terms of what needs to be done in terms of making that label efficient through that type of process. So I think that those are the main things that I'm kind of seeing. There are always hurdles within that supply chain, but I think with the collaboration with supply chain partners across the board, I think it is critical, because I think there is an education that can come to it. There's still plenty of people calling this a sticker.
That collaboration conversation, I think is really powerful. I'm going to bring up another quick graphic that it maybe captures, because I'm intrigued by our opportunity as people in the label space that live labels, right, and our opportunity to drive those innovation conversations, right? So a quick graphic, somewhat automotive centered, although again we're talking about a number of industrial durable marketplaces. But in automotive, you have these conversations that are the disruptive conversations, right? Shared ownership, the idea of autonomy and driverless cars, and then of course power in general. Maybe not so much a disruptive conversation, but just a rocket ride of acceleration here with announcements from Ford and General Motors and so on and so forth. So you have these high level topics that drive innovative conversations. And then, of course, here on the right of our quick graphic is the environmental reminder, right? That certainly is across all industries and of great concern, and with a new administration is likely to continue to be a real big part of the conversation. So, maybe let's talk a little bit about that. Move the lens to 5 years out, and these types of disruptive conversations, and where labeling can play a role in accomplishing maybe corporate initiatives surrounding those, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when you start to look at these areas, right, you start to look at end of life of product, and what do they want to do at the end of the life of a product, right? Do they want to have something that's just totally recyclable? And it's not too far-fetched to think that that's a possibility. It's done in other segments. Can that happen in industrial goods space? And how does the label play a role in that? Right? In other spaces, you have to get that label off for everything else to be recycled, because the label will be a contaminant. So what does that look like for the industrial space? And is that on their mind? Is that a goal? If that's a goal, then we need the quicker we can get visibility to that goal, the quicker we can start to collaborate on a solution that's going to fit, right, and kind of bring that forward versus having to wait or have them not even be thinking about it. So you speak to electric cars. I mean, I think it was GM that recently spoke that in 5 years they're going all electric. So what's the impact on that on labels?
Cadillac.
Was it Cadillac? Okay, thanks, Bill. But I think more and more will be saying, we'll be coming out with the type of initiative, and it's a very different environment for a label. From a combustion engine, we're under hood, where there's a lot of heat, a lot of things going on, and to electric, that a lot of that goes away. But so what can we do with a label there, that's going to be different and meet goals that they want to do with that overall car, right? Because I think what's the tendency, again, is it's not a hit on them. It's just that we already have a label that works in combustion engines. Just transfer all those labels over to the electric car. Well, yeah, I think there's other ways to go at it. I think other spaces that I'm seeing popping right now too, that I think are going to have a lot of legs moving forward, is just solar energy. I mean, around just where I live here in the Chicagoland area, more and more houses have these on the roof. I mean, 5 years ago, you wouldn't even see it, but now you see more and more houses with these solar energies on top of their rooftops. And I think that's going to continue to move forward as that cost of energy kind of, you meet that crossover point. And what does that mean for labeling? I mean, what else can labeling be doing on, and not just labeling, but protection of the glasses, or things that we can be doing outside of that, just for the durable good overall. Drones is another one. I certainly think that, what COVID kind of showed you is that, people kind of got housed in. A lot of people were afraid to even go out, but they still needed to get goods. And so Amazon does obviously a great job in getting things to you, but if trucks aren't available, or if there's somehow, there's a strike on that, I can definitely see within 5 years that these drones are starting to deliver products to your home. What does the labeling look on that? That's almost like a baby aircraft.
Instructional, again, near field communication, all those types of opportunities.
All kinds of things going on there, right? So, I mean, how can the label help? But then also, what kind of labeling do they want on there, right? And so, I think those are the discussions that you need to get in front of them and really start to have. I mean, what is their long-term plan? What are they looking to do? And then play that back into, okay, this is how we can help you, right? And I do think this is throughout the supply chain of, all the way from, the people that are resins of adhesives through us, through you, and then what you do after sale as well to service customers. What does that look like? And how can you bring together a package that's really going to help them reach their goals on a label that they really aren't thinking can help their goals, right? It's almost like you have to educate them on, okay, that's your goal. This is how we can tie in to help you achieve that. And maybe it's something that they never even thought about. I think those are the discussions that need to take place. And some of these things that I definitely see have some legs moving out into, 5 years now.
Yeah, we love the conversation surrounding, the connection that the provider of the good wants to have with their end user, and really trying to walk together in that emotion they're trying to elicit from their end user, that information they're trying to provide, or whatever however they're trying to connect with their end user, and where does labeling come into play. Sometimes it's quite obvious. Sometimes it's a trickier conversation. Maybe you have to roll up your sleeves a little higher, so to speak, in order to really dive into that. But it's a fun conversation and a powerful conversation to think about your client's end user, and whether or not they're really asking how labels can help them better connect with them.
Absolutely. I read a book, and in there it was the future of marketing is not talking about products. It's about storytelling of the product, right? It's telling a story, right? And brands do a really good job. I mean, the Super Bowl was on yesterday. You saw pretty much every commercial out there is telling a story of a product, of their product, right? Connecting with an end user. And you see that being done through labels today in other segments, right? So you look at a wine bottle, you can walk in and, do a near field on it, and it'll tell you where that grape was grown, all the way through to how it got to the shelf.
I'm amazed by that. I love it.
It is.
I love it.
It's slick, and then you think about industrial goods, like, well, why do I care about where the screw came from? And that's a fair point.
But to your point, when you bring in quality and you bring in the value to the legal supply chain of tracing and so on and so forth, now all of a sudden we're having a different conversation, which is, I think, where you're headed on that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. So what else can that do to help the consumer with the product, right? Moving forward, hey, look at you're getting an extra wobble here within your engine. You might want to get that checked out before your lawnmower doesn't work anymore.
Right.
Can a label communicate that in a way that allows them to be it's more predictive maintenance versus I need to have maintenance now.
Right. Yeah. And that's a great reminder, right? I mean, we're used to maybe our car sending us the information to our phone now, but a lawnmower isn't doing that yet. And Lord knows there's really neat opportunity to connect through appliance with that end user as well. In regards to maintenance or a cleaning cycle, or even maybe what's in the refrigerator, those types of things. And that world is starting to take shape, and the label conversation doesn't need to lag that world. And hopefully that's what viewers today can take out of a quick discussion, right? We here we go. We covered our topics with a ton to think about. Maybe in closing, really quick, Kevin, if there was a summary statement, or maybe a key question or two that the viewer could take away, thinking about what kinds of conversations should I be having, so I'm I'm prepared, or I'm preparing to be in a better place, 5 years out? What would those maybe a couple best questions be in your mind?
Yeah, I think the goal would be to try and get to the brand owners of these big brands, or at these manufacturers and OEMs. I think that they're the keepers of the vision, and they know where they want to go with that product. And it can be tough to get to those people, but I think once you do, really talking to them and understanding what their product platforms look like and what's the overall message and goal of the product that they want to have out there. And then from that point, internalizing that, collaborating with the supply chain, and coming back to them really with a story of, this is how the label that you're not even thinking about can help you achieve that goal. Right? I know you're looking at all the other things that are going to help you achieve that goal, but here's something else. Why not have the whole, everything that goes in and on the product also being an additive to your overall goal? I think that that's where the power will be. That's where the innovation will spur. It's challenging because even within the same industry, right? Even within, let's just take automotive, each OEM has different specifications for their labels, so that even drives innovation tougher, right? Because you can't just make a broad innovation a lot of times. It has to be very vanilla to work across everything. You get down to these different specifications, and all of a sudden there are different tweaks that need to be made to the product. So it's hard to get big innovation, but doesn't mean you can't get the innovation that's critical to that specific end user, and really nail that. And then once you have that idea, those ideas are probably throughout an industry, and they might have to be tweaked, but you have the power now of understanding what's really needed and bringing that forward. I think that is really, I think that takes place in other industries, and I really would like to see that, and I'm pushing to see that happen within the industrial space.
Yeah, boy, we would go arm in arm with that conversation, and we enjoy our clients that are open to those conversations, and look forward to helping our clients that are starting that journey, realize, I love the word additive, realize the additive value of their brand marketing, through and their labeling processes. I think that's a great summary. Kevin, I can't thank you enough for joining us for a few minutes.
Absolutely.
Boy, we really appreciate it. We appreciate our relationship with Avery Dennison, and look forward to what's ahead. Hopefully, to the viewership out there, this has been, even if you take one or two things away, it's been helpful. Again, Kevin, thank you, and look forward to what's ahead.
Yeah, Bill, thank you for the opportunity.